replacing.
Thank you.
Just both two you. That's fine.
Thank you, Cathal. Minister, first of all, I want to welcome the opportunity to participate in this debate and the statements on climate action. It's telling that about 30 seconds into your own speech that you mentioned carbon taxes and carbon pricing. And I think it's regrettable that from the government's perspective, and indeed from some in the political circles, that the whole debate on climate action is framed around carbon taxes and carbon increases, as if that's the panacea for the solutions which are necessary. There isn't agreement in this House, that's for sure, on increasing carbon taxes, but there is agreement from all of the experts, and you mentioned one expert, but there's certainly agreement from all the experts that carbon taxes are regressive. That was restated by the Department of Finance, it was restated by the ESRI, and it's been restated even by the Minister for Finance. So if it's regressive, then that's the first problem. But the bigger problem for it is it doesn't work, in the sense that it doesn't change people's behaviour unless alternatives are in place. And just before you come back and say, well, Sinn Féin and others are against levies or taxes that are progressive to change people's behaviour, we supported the sugar tax. In fact, we called for a long number of years. We supported the plastic bag levy. Why? Because they work, because people have obvious alternatives that they can use. But carbon tax increases will raise revenue. But for the vast majority of people who can't buy one of the million electric cars that your government says will be on the road over the next 10 years, which is an impossibility, or can't do a deep retrofit that people with deep pockets can afford, it's not going to be something that they can mitigate against. And that means that all we're doing is increasing their cost of living, and we're not dealing with the problems at all. There are solutions, of course, and I think what would be much more effective if we're really serious about climate action is to start with the alternatives. And the very starting point should be public transport. There's a lot of areas, a lot of parts of the country which don't have proper public transport. There needs to be a joined-up thinking here in terms of the national planning framework. And Minister, I support many elements of the Project 2040, a national planning strategy which looks at regional cities. Those regional cities are Cork City, are Limerick City, Galway City and Waterford City. I don't see any evidence of any joined-up thinking in terms of having integrated transport hubs or strategies for those cities, looking to 20 years' time when the population targets which are set are met, and then having the proper transport systems in place. I don't see the investments in public transport which are necessary, but it needs to happen. I also don't see the type of retrofitting programmes. The retrofit is needed for older people. I think that would be the best start. I don't see the type of community-led, and Deputy Dooley talked about community-led renewable energy farms, whether it's wind farms. We had one before, and the Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action today, Minister, it's the only one in the country. And it's the only one in the country because the government hasn't learned the lessons of how difficult it is for community-led wind farms to actually get up and running in the first place and operate and add the value that they have. All the barriers that wind farm that's community-led faced almost 20 years ago are still there for those who are looking at this today. But we have made advances in wind energy. We certainly haven't in terms of making it easier for community-led projects to work. There are lots of alternatives, Minister, that can and should be put in place, and I think that's where the focus should be. That's where the debate should be. We can have our differences on carbon tax increases. If I believed that they would change people's behaviour and reduce carbon emissions, I would support them, as I supported the sugar tax, as I supported the plastic bag levy, but I don't think it will, and I think it's window dressing, and I think it's pretence, and I don't think that does justice to the climate action debate which we should have. Minister, I also think it's incredible that this government is pushing ahead with the importation of fracked gas, even though fracking is banned here. I know we'll be debating this issue tomorrow here in this House as well. But it is extraordinary, Minister, that it's banned for the obvious enormous environmental and social damages it inflicts. We in Sinn Féin have consistently opposed fracking at every level of government, but now we have a situation where the government is pushing ahead with the decision of the Shannon LNG terminal. This project is going ahead despite a lot of concerns, despite a lot of opposition. Even before there has been a proper debate in this Dáil, we have a high-level committee in Brussels meeting on Friday that could make decisions around this. It's again hypocrisy, Minister, and that's the problem with this government's approach to climate action. We saw it with the Mercosur trade deal, we're seeing it again here, and we're seeing it across the board. I'll hand over to my colleague now, but the problem, Deputy Dooley touched on this, that your plan is high on rhetoric, Minister, but when you actually start looking at the detail, a lot of it is targets that can't be met. And you will be aware that the Department of Transport wrote to your department and said your objective of 1 million electric cars can't be met. Your deep retrofit plan that was rolled out for people with deep pockets fell apart, and then you had to patch it back up again. So even the limited things that you are trying to do haven't worked, Minister. And I want to work with government, and as do my party, to make sure that we put the solutions in place. But they have to be real, they have to be practical, they have to be tangible, and they have to work. And if they don't work, and if they're just window dressing, we won't support them.